Hello everyone, welcome to the Duke London podcast. I'm going to just check what episode we're on because I don't remember. That's Instagram, let's try again. Where's my app? We are on, I reckon, episode 36 or so, which is quite a lot. So 36, yeah, I was right, killed it. Episode 36 of the Duke London podcast. We're here at the University of East London, thanks to the urban practice degree. A big shout out to Joe. We are also here with some lovely people. I'm going to first introduce Taya. Taya has been working with me for the last 3 months. Not that long. It's been a few months, let's say.
I need to be closer.
That Taya's been working with me and the Duke London podcast through the University of East London's urban practice degree. She's been working on a kind of internship, working across the partnership between myself and the Duke London podcast. Myself and the University of East London. Taya's been assisting me with all sorts of stuff to make the podcast happen and to help the partnership grow. So massive thank you for everything you've done, Taya. It's been lovely to work with you. Obviously because of Corona. Hiya Taya, because she's about to graduate. And obviously because of Corona, we've done the best we can. We've had to do a lot of Zoom work and a lot of remote emailing and stuff. It's been wonderful. And as part of Taya's internship, she has set up today's podcast. So everything is directed by Taya today. She has also chosen our guests. So I'm going to hand over to you, you can introduce the guests.
Okay.
And give us a little bit about why you chose them.
Okay. Oh, this is so strange. Right. So hello, everybody. So I kind of made this podcast episode to be about a thing that I think I've realized throughout uni, all my 3 years, that there's definitely a divide between being a theoretical dancer and a practical dancer, and that there doesn't seem to be a marriage between the both. I feel like if you think you're good at theory, you think you're good at theory. If you think you're good at practical, you're good at practical. So I kind of wanted to make a episode about how they interweave and why they need to interweave and how our course does it a lot. So I chose my 2 lecturers today. So Dr. Saraleigh Castelyn is the reader in performing arts. I know this. Which she is an amazing South African researcher, and then Dr. Laura Robinson is also an amazing lecturer on our course. And she is also a researcher, and you focus more on television and hip hop and spectacle and dance.
Correct.
Am I correct? Yeah, cool. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves as well?
Yeah, tell us a bit about yourselves.
Go, Laura.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tay.
That's okay.
We do that with teaching as well. I make you go first, remember?
Yeah, you won't get this from the podcast necessarily, but Saraleigh is quite a bit taller than me. So we make for quite an interesting double act whenever we're teaching together. I'm generally looking up.
I think we like the British Bake Off, but for dance, yeah?
That's a TV show. We've got to cut that out of the episode so we can trademark that.
Taya, thank you so much for inviting us today. We really, really appreciate it. I feel quite special, actually. It's really nice to be having this opportunity. So I'm Dr. Laura Robinson. I'm senior lecturer on the UEL Dance Urban Practice degree. I would consider myself a popular dance scholar, and we can maybe get into what we mean by popular dance as we go through. I have, over the years, developed a real interest in, I suppose, dance that sits outside of that traditional Western arts theatre canon, and to the point where even dances within, if you take hip hop, for example, even those that are maybe more commercially orientated, in terms of the periphery of street dance or any kind of commercialized work, I'm quite interested in that as a researcher. I started, my dance kind of journey started like a lot of those did in the UK in terms of, the ballet, the tap, the going into contemporary classes, etc. Went to the University of Surrey and did my BA honours there, and was always both really interested in writing about dance and researching about dance and exploring dance through different medium, as well as obviously physically dancing, and finding the really that meeting point you talked about, Taya, in between. And I feel ever so lucky that I get to teach on this wonderful course, because in my opinion it does what a lot of courses don't. It concentrates on those styles that are often overlooked, and we can get into why that might be as we go along. And yeah, I think the other side of what I do as well, I should say, is from a producing and management perspective. I'm also the program leader for the MA Dance Producing and Management at London Studio Centre. And I think when we get into talking about writing and different styles of writing and Arts Council applications, etc., we can kind of get into that. So that's kind of a brief overview of me.
It's very hard to follow that. Thanks.
Sorry.
All right. So I'm Dr. Saraleigh Castelyn, born in a little town called Pietermaritzburg in South Africa. Got sent to ballet when I was 4 to stop me duck walking. I'm very tall, so I'm kind of like didn't walk properly because I was embarrassed. Let's say I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid era. I was classified white. My parents were classified white. This meant that I had access to really, really good education. I did come from a working class background, but it was through doing dance as such that I got bursaries. So that really, really helped. Went through, did ballet, and then landed up at university in the 90s, the early 90s, and got introduced to something called physical theatre. I was so freaking excited because, like Miss Jones next to me, it meant I could dance in my Doc Martens. At the same time, in South Africa, when you do a degree, you do a lot of subjects. So I also did history and English and some other ones. I did French, but I wasn't really good at that. Then what happened is, how can I explain? So in South Africa at that time, dance was really, really political. So a lot of the kind of dance styles, so for example, like contemporary dance, its kind of roots have people like Sylvia Glasser, who would go out into the townships bringing dance to everybody else. So it had like a activist stance at the end. And when I was younger, I was very, very political. I was involved in all kind of anti-apartheid kind of protests. There was even something that I really loved, which was the End Conscription campaign, because at that time, all white boys over 16 had to go to the army. So basically, whether you believed or not, you were made to fight in a system. So I was involved in that, and at the same time writing a lot for the magazines or the kind of pamphlets or the zines around that. Got into university then, doing these other subjects, and I got a little bit frustrated when I was hanging out with the history or the English people, my fellow students, and they would say unkind things about those that studied dance, because apparently we weren't as articulate or as clever, and that did my head in, because I was beating them at marks at history. So that happened. So I started getting frustrated about that. And then I moved to another university where I was under the, she's a guru, Dr. Leanne Lutz. She is also a very activist. She started one of the first dance companies in South Africa, which I had the honor to dance in before it went totally professional. With that, she was really pushing at us for thinking about the kind of theoretical approach to dance, but kind of feeding in also to the practice. At the same time, I was extremely frustrated because I'd go to the library and there'd be books around kind of Western dance traditions, Martha Graham. And these were expensive books to buy in South Africa at that time, when you think of the exchange rate and so on. But there was none of the kind of vibrant, exciting work that was happening made by the local choreographers or local dance companies who were literally breaking barriers about going into different... If you think about this, black and white bodies and black and brown bodies and black and yellow bodies weren't allowed to touch. So people are now working underground, making contemporary dance, and especially with something like contact, touching each other, moving over each other. So there's something quite electric in that. And then as well, the dance styles were being kind of brought into contemporary. So there's a Zulu tradition called Ngoma, and that was brought in. So I'm frustrated that I don't see these books or articles on the shelf. So that led me to study further. So I was one of the first to do an MA in dance. So, you know, a massive dissertation. I think at that time it was 40 to 60,000 words. Then came here, accidentally, landed up lecturing at a few places, did my PhD in South African dance theatre, and then had the fabulous opportunity to come and work on this dance program when it was only a year old. And it was brought in basically because of my specialism at looking at dance from the global south. Yeah? Does that capture it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
Wonderful, extensive history. It's really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So obviously you guys are both working on this program which deals mainly with hip hop dance. So I'm interested to hear you guys' thoughts, and Taya as well, on the... It's quite broad, but I guess the like tie-in with theoretical dance and theoretical kind of study with hip hop dance, and how that fits in, because I think there's a lot of... I haven't studied it, but it seems from what I know, there's a lot of history of that with ballet and contemporary. There's a lot of textbooks on choreography. There's a lot of different choreographers who are studied. You know, you can read about
Go to the library.
Cunningham, or you know what I mean. And but in hip hop, I mean, as a culture from the beginning, we're like 60 years old or something. So it's not a massive history in general. And I would say the history of hip hop being practiced theoretically is also quite short, even in comparison to that.
Yeah, or it concentrates on music instead of the body moving.
Interesting, yeah. So I guess what is maybe your thoughts on that subject in general, if you have any kind of free thoughts on it, but also how your approaches, I guess, with the course and how you're kind of taking something like that and turning it into like teaching the students to practice these things theoretically as well as because, you know, a lot of the education that exists around hip hop from my experience is like, do this, learn this, practice this, like here's your foundations, here's how this works, here's how you dance the thing. And it's not often that we sit down and write about hip hop or write or read about hip hop or analyze things, you know what I mean? So I guess what sort of things do you guys do, and how is that process for you? Or even your viewpoint on it.
Go on, Saraleigh.
Okay. So I would start first and foremost that you've got a dance style. This is how I always explain it to the students. So hip hop, if we think about breaking, it's upside down. Yeah? That is not just about the body being physically upside down. That's saying something about, if you look at the history, you look at the society, especially kind of Hispanic, African-American, mainly men, not being able to access or be represented in kind of mainstream general society and be basically marginalized. But you've got a dance style that's upside down. So if you think about it and then approach it kind of in a kind of critical thinking kind of way, if the dance style's upside down and it says something, it's trying to say something about society, how would that relate to thinking about it critically? So what are the politics involved in that? So let's see who has written stuff around the politics of being upside down, or the politics of saying, actually, you're not letting me into this community, so I'm going to resist, I'm going to disrupt, okay? And then we take those, think about those kind of words, and then I can go, well, there's this fabulous academic called Michel Foucault, and he writes about how power doesn't come from the top, it comes everywhere. So now we can think about how those young men on the street were not oppressed, but were using their bodies as a powerful tool to then expose the kind of their marginalization in society. So there's a way to kind of come in that way. Yeah?
Yeah.
So when I started my literature review for my PhD, which I should explain what that is, first of all, for anyone that doesn't know. So
we've all got PhDs. So
you
don't even have to explain it to me.
Sorry. When I started my literature review, it sounds very like...
Yeah, it's similar with my PhD.
No, what do you mean? Miss Jones is going to get a PhD, yeah?
Essentially, if you're setting out any kind of research question in academia, you want to find out what's been written previously. So we often use the Mandela quote, "Standing on the shoulders of giants." No.
Isaac Newton.
Is it Isaac Newton? I was going to say Edison. Then we were going to go all over the place. So standing on the shoulders of giants, you want to build upon work that's already there. And you would say that's absolutely the same in terms of hip-hop culture, in terms of knowing the histories, the OGs, whatever stories that came before. And I think that's kind of key to the culture. So you want to find out what's been written about before. So you go, okay, let's do a literature research. Let's find out what's out there. And initially you find out then there are some great texts in terms that really set out the history in terms of late 70s Bronx period. You would find out very much it was Jeff Chang, Joseph Schloss, and from those accounts, and they very much had privileged the voices of hip hop practitioners within those. So then you could almost kind of say, well, that's some of the historical texts around that. Then you had... And more has been merging this more, call it intersectional kind of work, where it's going, okay, we're going to look at hip hop dance, but we're going to also then, like you were saying, Saraleigh, in terms of we're going to focus maybe on the politics around it, or we're going to focus around issues of identity or what's being explored. Throughout all of this, though, central to it all is the body. It's the moving body. And I was listening to a scholar recently, Thomas de France, who said, where we are now is the body is both lively and urgent in terms of where we are in 2021. And essentially any research on any style that when people are always defending dance studies, it's like, well, no, let's just think about it for a second as what can the body tell us about how we live, where we live, the cultures we're amongst, whose stories are being privileged, whose aren't. And that's where I've always centered my writing from in terms of movement description, analysis, really going, well, what is the body doing? And let's zoom in on that. And like Google Earth, where you get to zoom out, then what's affected by that? What's challenging? What else is going on as a political movement at that time, etc. So there's so much more that can be written on this topic, and it tends to be, it's either like the history or more and more now, which is so needed, is more looking at kind of Black cultural studies, Black performance studies, looking at the
feminism
form as not just the dance, but how it works in terms of an expression of culture, expression of identity. And there's so many more avenues. But as you said, what you tend to get still is you might get a focus on Merce Cunningham. You might have an entire book, a monograph on Merce Cunningham, from the history to what people's readings of the choreography, etc. And then I guess, where's that book on Kenrick Sandy? Or where's that book on
Rennie Harris?
Rennie Harris, and or some of the kind of female voices that are really coming through now. I would hope one day Chloe Dean, for example, like, you know, in terms of that focus, that same level of focus that is attended to on those predominantly white Western concert dance practitioners. What we're encouraging our students to do is going, well, why can't you go away and focus on these and give these choreographers their voice through this work? I'll leave it there. I have no idea whether a question was answered or not.
I was going to veer off slightly and kind of plug my own dissertation. But that's one of the reasons why. So my dissertation is about like hypermasculinity in terms of like commercial and heels dance, and how even though I would say like commercial dance has been in the mainstream for like a very long time now. Not long in terms of longevity of dance, but in terms of being seen the most in mainstream, I feel like it has been seen quite a lot. But I still don't think it's written about at all. Because when doing research for my dissertation, it was all about, if it's anything about masculinity in dance, it was all about ballet. And I just had to apply it to what I was doing.
That's the word.
Come on, high grades. Yeah, and it's helpful in terms of writing work, but not helpful in terms of like my own education. Because I felt like as I was writing, I was kind of like, well, I'm deciding that this is what it means because that's what I think. But
which is valid.
Yeah.
If you like support
That's
it.
how you also input your voice into
That's
the
true.
history.
Yeah, but I just feel like there's a lot. So I like focused a lot on like Yanis Marshall and people like that, and I just feel like they've been here for ages, and that sort of area has been around for ages, and yet it still has no written work about it. So hip hop is almost running behind, trying to catch up.
Okay, so I have thoughts, and I shall share them. I wonder, and please give me pushback or tell me what you think of these, all three of you. Like, I wonder if the lack of these sort of texts or studies on people, like you said, like Kenrick, Chloe, even like commercial dance and stuff, I wonder if that's due to a lack of, for me, it's an underlying kind of lack of time in the style having existed. Like I said, the entire culture wasn't started before, you know, however long ago. And I think if we haven't developed, let's say, like boundaries as to what we determine those styles to be, which I think is still massive arguments now, which I don't hear as much of in terms of ballet or even contemporary, where the kind of cultural endpoint lies of what is or isn't hip hop, because there's still arguments to be made about a lot of these things, and there's still a whole conversation around, is commercial dance even a style? Because it's I mean, we had this talk with one of the podcasts with Tali, I think it was an industry one, where commercial is about, like, if I do breaking on a TV show, I'm a commercial dancer. You know what I mean? So what is and as far as I know, I could be way off, and especially talking to two people with PhDs.
On that, sorry, a PhD essentially is, you know, an awful lot about very little. So just remember that. Like,
you heard it here first.
That's really key.
Okay. But I think from my research or understanding and experience, like commercial dance, if you look back at, like, let's say some of the Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson videos, they weren't doing hip hop. They were doing essentially like some type of jazz dance. You know what I mean? And it was about the lines and the shapes that could stand out on big arena tours or music videos, right? So like Smooth Criminal, there's no hip hop in that routine. It's pretty much just jazz, and they're doing like pirouettes and stuff. And like, I think what has, for me, this is my analysis of it, what has happened is that, I guess, what's that movie where she pulls the thing and the water comes down?
Flashdance,
right?
Dance.
So isn't the whole idea with that movie that, like, she sees these breakers and she starts to integrate that? I think that's kind of speaks about the history of like commercial dance, where it's like the thing that was popular was hip hop. Hip hop in its most raw form is not very presentable for a stage, right? It's not even front facing, it's you know, it's inwards facing, it's a cipher, it's a battle. So they take the influences and they've mixed it with what I perceive to be like some type of jazz, and you get what you have now, which is commercial dance, which is like jazz with hip hop styling on top. So you're doing what looks like a breaking, like a cross step or something like that, but it's not, you know, or it's this mixed with like what could be popping, but it's not, and you get this kind of hybrid style. So for me, that this is all just to make a point, but like that speaks more about the function. It needs to go on an arena tour. It needs to go in a music video. So we determine this thing commercial as this style that's developed, but that could easily, like Paris Goebel really works in dancehall and Afro type of dances, right? So she's not doing this. Her hip hop influences are minimal. Her dancehall influences are huge, but she's still a commercial dancer. You know what I mean? So it's like taking whatever's popular and fitting it into this format of what the function is, right? So I say all that to say, I feel like these texts and these things, these studies on these choreographers, because we're quite, it's quite a shallow history, let's say, so far, in the terms of, you know, the whole realm of dance, the whole history of dance in itself. We haven't given it enough time to find what are the boundaries. And there's still, like, whatever I just said, people could argue with me, right? If I say what is or isn't hip hop, like, is Boy Blue more hip hop or less hip hop than Soul Mavericks doing breaking, right? There's an argument for both. Like, is it hip hop just on a stage, or is it not hip hop anymore? Is a breaker that then does like hip hop theater and starts to do like kind of a hybrid version, does that become more or less hip hop? I think there's all these arguments still happening, right? So my thoughts would be that with these kind of loose boundaries, people don't know necessarily like what to write about, because if you're writing about a choreographer on stage, and if you analyze, like, let's say if I analyze a Boy Blue piece, right, I'm analyzing choreography. So I'm analyzing staging, I'm analyzing space, and in the terms of what we say hip hop is, we're talking about the political, the movement, the creation of the styles that this choreography was influenced by. But what I'm analyzing on stage is not that stuff anymore. So then I guess it makes it harder. Whereas with ballet, we can look at it and go, well, that's ballet, that's not ballet, easy. So I'm going to analyze that, and I'm analyzing ballet, I'm analyzing these techniques. Whereas with hip hop, it's like, what is it that we analyze, and where do we stop analyzing, and where do we start analyzing? This is my thoughts, but I feel like you're going to massively push back.
No.
Oh no, okay.
No. I'm going to say some things.
Okay, go.
So
hit
firstly,
me.
when you're
I
talking,
love that you took notes.
Yeah, you should see Dr. Robinson's notes, and they neat and tidy. Okay, so a few things whilst you were talking. One, when you're talking about hip hop,
Yes.
there's an absolute desire with some people to kind of solidify it,
Yes.
to make it like stable. But I think what's exciting about it as a style is that it's not unstable.
Yeah.
So if we go back to the roots, the fact that, you know, it's influenced by African American, Puerto Rican culture.
Of course.
So it's
Yeah.
already a hybrid, and it's already a style that's moving. All right. So
And the culture of it is fluid.
the culture is changing because it is, you know, it started off as a youth culture. There's now old hip hop heads.
Yeah.
You
for
know,
sure.
but a few things. One, so when you're talking about the fact that it's not written about, I think that comes to the issue around access to higher education. And so, yes, it's a young style, but so is like contact improvisation, which was the 1960s. The difference is that the people who were doing something like contact improvisation were embedded into universities or had some type of university education. Whereas when we're dealing with hip hop, it's like it shows you how a certain sector of society have been marginalized from higher education. Yeah. So what it's really important, and this is why I love this course, and I will keep on saying it's one of the best courses, all right, even when I'm an old lady, because this is about like higher education saying, hang on, these type of styles also need to be studied in the same way that the other styles are. And the way to have that is to have young students and mature students who have that experience, whether it is in a town hall or, you know, in some kind of, you know, hip happening area, to bring their own experiences and to experience what it is to start to document and analyze these styles. Because my aim is, in a few years, I don't want to be sitting at this table. I want Miss Jones to be the expert. Yeah. And I'll push. And I get very kind of upset that we're only starting now to have students from this course now doing postgrads, thinking of PhD. And that's like the first step for us to say, hang on, we're here. Yeah, these styles are here. So that's the one thing. Then when it comes to hip hop, and when you're talking about whether it's, whether you're thinking about Soul Mavericks or Boy Blue, that's really about stage, screen, and streets. Yeah. And what makes it interesting is that it's about the translation or the adjustment of the style.
And this is my question, I guess, where do we, in the translation, is there a point where we can lose what hip hop is? And just to say, I'm really on the side of what you said about the culture being fluid and everything. I'm super for that. But I think when we try to tie something down to analyze it, we need to kind of set the goalposts of what we're analyzing. So I guess for me, as much as being a participant in the culture, I love that it changes and it's fluid. If I think about analyzing the culture, I want to set goalposts and say, what is hip hop and where does it end?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Because something might a different. So rather than thinking about whether something is something or not, how I like to view it is to look at ideas of value.
Okay.
Because all the conversations here are around concepts of value, be that and referencing Cheryl Dodd's I was like referencing Cheryl Dodd's on this because she looks at
Open
value.
brackets,
she looks at value within she looks at value within popular dance. So how value is constructed at a local level, how one style, how one genre, how one choreographer is valued over another, and that's happening very much in the community. And you could say that is shifting. Value in terms of, we're talking about certain styles of writing now, and we're, without really saying it, we're saying, oh well, academic writing's up here somewhere, whereas maybe blogs or something, and that is not the case.
That's not the case.
That might be the case as constructed by kind of Western academic institution, but it's not at all, and it's shifting. So also Ian Abbott, hi, clocking your Hip Hop Almanac, because I think in terms of capturing practitioner voices and that writing,
documentation,
from a UK perspective, because everything's very US centric when we look at kind of this kind of writing. So there's value in terms of the style of writing, and then really what's happening when something's being linked, we'll call it commercial dance for now, when something's being linked in terms of the purpose of this activity right now is to make £150 from one appearance on X Factor by being a backing dancer. There is a devaluing by being associated with economic value, if you see what I mean, because whatever the style is, there's concepts of being sold out essentially, or that hybridity, that where's the idea of that authentic essence, where's that kind of, well, that's gone now. That's because we're seeing it restaged. And I mean, my PhD was all around hip hop dance crews, and really, it was even contentious. Like, well, is that street dance? Is that street jazz? Is that, what are we even calling that? And I remember grappling with that for a while, going, no, I can't call this hip hop because it is not. So, I would say that anyone gets caught up in those debates around authenticity and whether something is better than another, or it's actually more about where's the value being created, and who's constructing that, and what, where's my position. Where am I situating myself in relation to creating
Which is
that?
what I was going to say about, you said goalposts.
Yes.
Okay, so I would answer, if I was supervising you, I would say, well, why can't you make those goalposts? Why can't you make the decision of what it is? If you want to fix it, if you want to make it stable, you make the choices. And then you tell me why you've made those choices. Because everyone's opinion is valid. Yeah? There are things that stick, all right? But those things that stick in themselves will not always be as constant. Yeah?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
can I throw in that I was going to agree, because personally, just from entering the dance world for only a short amount of time, I think there's quite a lot of counterproductivity with trying to like set everything as its own thing, because it not only translates from like writing, but I also find then it also falls into personal. it can become a personal thing between dancers, of undervaluing dancers if they're in a different style.
Yeah,
I
like a
feel
hierarchy of styles and what is and more
and
less
I feel
valid.
like the more we keep being like, well, commercial's not even it is a mixture of genres. It's like a palatable way of having hip hop on screen, but like it's like, I feel like losing my train of thought though. I feel like it's counterproductive, because you're surely just kind of gatekeeping people, and I feel like
Agreed.
the point of the dance world to keep its evolutions going is to mix.
Yeah, so here's my kind of response to both of you. And again, like, I don't necessarily, it's not that I am fighting for that point. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate.
But you have to do that.
Yeah.
That's what academia is all about. It's seeing it from multiple ways.
Yeah, and I'm also going off conversations I've had with people and stuff like that. So my kind of pushback, or question at least, devil's advocate to that, would be, if I am the one setting the goalposts, right? So if we want to talk about, not creating this hierarchy, or not saying something is or isn't valid, blah blah blah. My thing is that my whole education in hip hop has been very much that we need to look at kind of where it came from and all the kind of political things that we spoke about at the beginning, right? I have a certain experience with hip hop in London that I grew up in the time when like grime was around, and that was part of my childhood, and I feel very much ingrained, or grime and UK hip hop culture was something I was always around as a kid. Now, I wasn't around for the beginnings of breaking or hip hop or popping or locking. So in a way, if I'm the one to say, well, I've decided that I'm going to call this, or I'm going to say that, anyone can do anything, or this is hip hop and this is hip hop. Now that the culture has expanded to worldwide, right? There's I guess a kind of balance between allowing the culture to be fluid, but also allowing it to still be the thing that it was when it was created, and not, I guess, in a way, like whitewashing or gentrifying the styles, where it's like I come in and go, well, I don't think hip hop should be about being on the street. It should be about being on stage. And it's like, well, of course I'm going to say that because I have the money to go to the stage, and I have the money to do this, and I'm in a position where I can go to Sadler's on the weekend. Like, whereas the way that the style was created was from people that couldn't access those things. So they created their own thing. So then there's a balance between, yes, I want hip hop artists to be able to expand to the stage, and I do that. I work with hip hop theater. I've paid rent from hip hop theater, so I can't say that I wouldn't want that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if I don't know, where does that line lie between? Oh, I'm not gonna say like, commercial dance is fine, and somebody like Paris Goebel is a hip hop dancer, and we want to call her a hip hop dancer or whatever. Chances of her listening to this are very low, but it's fine. But if, I guess it's maybe just a question of like, is it my place to be saying that? And if we want to lock down, like I said, if I want to write an essay on, let's say hip hop dance in commercial spaces, let's say, for example, who decides what hip hop dance is and where it is or isn't in commercial spaces? So if I see this person do a routine, or this person do a routine, and this person do a routine, and you ask me to choose which one is hip hop, do I go off my goalpost of what I think hip hop is, or do I go off what the culture kind of has dictated it is? And there's a very big difference from what it was at the beginning to what it is now. So I guess the most any of us are really doing is trying to keep in touch with the culture and going like, okay, well, this is kind of what things are at the moment, and we kind of accept this, and you kind of have to keep your finger on the pulse a bit to know when things have shifted and this is now being accepted. Like even in music, in hip hop music, things that didn't used to be accepted as hip hop and maybe at the beginning were pushed back against are now like that style of hip hop music is accepted. And so it's like, it seems like a very hard thing to do, to take something that is consistently moving, lock it down and write an essay on it after only, like I said, like 50 or 60 years. Because I feel like after 500, 600 years of like ballet or whatever, you have a lot more consistency to look at. And even if things shift, you're like, yeah, but overall, this is kind of accepted as ballet and this kind of isn't. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
Go
I
on.
got told this thing a long, long time ago when I was trying to like lock down what contemporary dance in South Africa is,
Yeah.
as opposed to contemporary dance in any, in the global north. And Jay Patho, who's this fabulous choreographer, said this, and this is how I think about hip hop, and this is how I think about commercial, and this is how I think about a lot of dance styles. If I have to light an incense stick in the corner of the studio, at the other corner of the studio, you will still smell incense.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed, but you will still recognize it as incense.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that about many dance styles. So it's about the recognition of what hip hop is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the minute you start doing that, you are naming. And there's the politics of naming and the politics of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that comes back to what Laura was saying about value. So then you have to think about, okay, so where am I putting those value systems as someone who is studying it? Yeah. And then also, what was my other point? Oh, so then if you're starting to name something, you're also excluding. All right. So then you've got to be aware of what you're excluding.
Yeah.
So coming back to the origins, whether you are going to be writing a dissertation around the history of hip hop, I would say there's not enough written about UK. Okay. Or if you're going to be writing a dissertation that's looking at the actual choreographic of staging.
Yeah.
All right. You've got to think of, all right, who you are excluding, who you're including, the value systems, all right, and then how you would capture that incense in the room. Yeah? It's not easy. Students all think, I'm going to say this, Laura and I spend a lot of time having students come to us and they want a nice, clean yes answer or a no answer. But you're not going to get that. And if we think about dance as an art form, it can't be captured. Even when you put it on a screen, it's moving, it's disrupting, it's going around, okay? So if the actual kind of physicality, the corporeality, the embodiment, the actual thing that makes dance is that it refuses to be captured, dance styles, dance languages are going to be, they're going to be a mismatch. I'm thinking of patois, all right, for here in the UK. I'm thinking of Totsital in South Africa. It keeps moving, and I think that's something to be celebrated. And going on what Laura was saying about standing on the shoulder of giants, I'm going to say to you then, if you're going to make those the goalposts, how have you made that decision?
Which part?
The goalpost of what hip hop is. If you're saying it in terms of how it is, how someone is doing more commercial or not hip hop, I will say, okay, so where are you getting your information
Well,
from?
exactly. This is the question. So this is the thing where I think this is kind of my question, I guess, is like, where are we getting the goalposts from? Because I've never had to, I just talk about it on here or teach it in classes or whatever, but I don't have to write a PhD or write an essay.
Yeah, but what do you teach? Because that's the stuff that should be written.
I teach hip hop freestyle.
Okay.
And I teach sometimes popping. So the what I get from that is, and I teach a very specific type of thing because of all the complications. So even within hip hop freestyle, I don't teach like so much the history behind and I don't accept classes where that's where they're looking for a teacher for.
Yeah.
I teach practical foundations for battle-based hip-hop freestyle. So it's a very specific class that I teach.
What are those?
So that's the bounce, the rock, and the different ways of inputting creativity and foundations into those things.
I can't see those. Can you describe them to me?
Yes. So the bounce...
That's movement analysis.
Yeah.
That's movement description.
But I'm saying I only have those goalposts from... And the reason I teach what I teach is because I have specific experience in that area, right? So the reason I don't teach, I'll put on a class where I can teach you all the foundations of hip hop freestyle is because I don't have I wasn't there, I don't have every single social dance in my vocabulary to be able to put that in a class, right? But even still, I'm specifying what my class would be, right? So then my goalposts are based on my experience, and I have quite a lot of experience in the battle world and as a judge, as a competitor, as someone who's put on events, as someone who's traveled. But to do that, I've set the goalpost based on my experience, right? I don't have experience outside of that. So then I think all what anyone is doing is kind of trying to keep an eye on the culture and be like, what is the cultural goalposts of what is hip hop, right? And that's the hard thing. And I guess that's the thing that was kind of my question in like, if we're going to write, like, imagine the dissertation was like, what is hip hop? Where would we start besides what the originators thought was hip hop and what we tend to culturally accept as hip hop? So that's the two.
Culturally specific, because hip hop looks different in different places.
Of course, yeah.
But when you look, there's something hip-hoppity about
But what
it,
is that?
which is the incense. Yeah, but that's the thing that can't.
Okay.
The fun is in the grey stuff, right? And I think is what we're saying. Like the fun is in the grey, and whenever we're battling this idea of genre and being, as you were saying, being one thing or another, then we want to look at the grey, and then why is the grey? And my whole thing is when we talk about, go back to the term history, it's like, first of all, there's his story, and often it is his story, and so who's created the narrative? So there's, I can't remember the name of the musicologist, but wrote about in the phrase "keeping it real," and kind of looked at that idea of keeping it real, because there's the idea of keeping it, because there's a grappling there of respect for the culture,
Respect for your elders,
respect for the elders, respect for the histories, but also kind of grappling with trying to hold some incredible idea of an authentic origin when it's messy and it's to truly track. You were saying about Michael Jackson in terms of the influence of jazz, the influence of Lindy Hop, the influence of kind of all these colliding together, and then almost defining it and calling it something else. So who gets to call it something else?
Naming.
So I mean, we could be wrestling here a while, in a sense, and I think it's great to wrestle with this discussion. Yeah. I also think this is purely my perspective, is that, and from working with maybe other scholars who work in kind of looking at hip hop dance culture, is in order for the work, especially that's happening in the UK, to have the true funding that it requires, to have the the status that it is to have. I mean, National Dance Awards, I'm sorry, it's quite a whitewashed in terms of what you're seeing in terms of the stars that are being represented, in terms of to have those kind of pinnacle moments that we really are, okay, hip hop dance theatre, for example, is now part of the zeitgeist and should be well known, is for us to maybe move past some of those debates, to reference them, to acknowledge that we're wrestling with them, but to also go, okay, but now what can we do? We know that it's no one thing. There lies the interest. That's what keeps it lively and messy. Urgent and messy. And let's go. Okay, let's go now. Let's take this on a wider scale. Not trying to close that argument by any means, but I think
it is an endless
argument.
But the thing is that that's what other styles have done, is that if you go back to history, someone's gone, well, that's the dominant story, and made that decision where it's actually not, we're not part of it. And so I think sometimes about things that are rebellion and on the side, we don't trust ourselves. Like we say, oh, we're not given value, we don't get enough value. But why are we waiting for someone to give us value? Why don't we just go, ownership, we're going to make it set?
Yeah, I feel like it's the beautiful curse of being creative, is that you're constantly validating yourself but also feeling undervalued. Because also, as a young creative, I feel like I know nothing, and I feel like you're all the ones that need to tell me stuff. But then also throughout this course, I've been told that I need to tell people stuff as well. But then it's that mixture of you don't want to get cocky and think you know everything. You don't.
Every year we learn from our students, every single year, every single class, especially I think when we teach dissertation and see the work that's been created and see some of the first-hand interviews that have been done
research,
with some incredible practitioners. And you go, wow, if we had those networks, or if we had that community or those access in terms of that. And we think that every year, and those dissertations are incredible, the work that comes out of them. And it's again going, okay, so how now can we support you in trying to document those in a way that is I don't know, considered, let's say, more valuable in the wider institution to get that published.
Yeah.
And therefore it is on a record and it has a DOI and it has something that you can search for, and it is academic literature. Therefore it has been peer reviewed, it has the relevant references, and we can therefore consider it fact, even though that's not the case at all, because those blogs, those Insta stories, those other ways of capturing words are just as valuable.
They're different modes, that's all. They're different modes. And I think, when you come back to the hierarchy of styles, there's also the hierarchy of like the written, and I think what makes it exciting with kind of marginalized styles like hip hop coming into academia is that you can also disrupt academia, and it's been happening like on the sides for a while in terms of, you get things like visual essays, you start to think about the relationship with words and bodies. I mean, it's in hip hop in itself. All right. So, you can think about that kind of stuff. But going back to Laura's point about the fabulous dissertations, it's the students do the most amazing primary research, and they are capturing the moment, the live, what's happening now. Okay. And the thing is historically, whether we like it or not, the written word has always been the thing that kind of has been valued. Yeah. All right. We know about certain societies because they're written and not oral, even though I would argue oral societies are, also absolutely valid and sometimes even more. But the written word in this part of the world is valued more. Now, that makes it even more urgent for our students to then be going on to doing MAs, doing PhDs, doing that kind of research so that they can take part in academia. Because academia is not going to let you in, all right? It's a ivory tower, okay? You can see that in terms of the bodies in the room, what they look like, where they've come from. And there are moments, and this is why, again, I love this course and this university, is because it's like all about kind of opening up, okay? Its history is that it's around people who didn't have like access to kind of, good primary, secondary education. And likewise, now when you've got dance styles like hip hop, like you need more of those students coming through and then going further into academia. Yeah. I don't know. I get depressed about this. I get depressed about this because like Laura was saying about funding, we have to constantly battle. And then dance as an art form, like we'll go to meetings and they'll go, how can you, like with people who are sociologists, he'll go, well, Dr. Robinson, how can you have a PhD in dance? And that all links to the fact that a long time ago, 17th century, there's this philosopher called Descartes, and he basically says that the mind and body are separate. And you'll see Western civilization going along that way. And that's, back to Laura, devaluing the body. All right. So dance has already got a fight when it comes to writing. It's already got a fight to be here in academia. So anyway, we can get in.
Do you? And again, I'm playing devil's advocate. This is my favorite game. Do you feel
that's what academia is all about?
Do you feel though that, because I hear a lot of conversations about this, and especially in the pandemic, there was something about the Save the Arts thing. I can't remember what was the point of it. I think it was like the funding was the first one to get cut or something when it was in the pandemic, all that.
Do you know that university arts, the government wants to cut?
Right. So here's my thing, and here's my question. We talk about arts being devalued as opposed to other things like whatever other businesses we're talking about. Do you think that there's something in the fact that like entertainment is less vital than doctors and nurses or emergency services or these type of things? And I know that and I know I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't hate dance. I know the room I'm sitting in. But my pushback in myself has always been, but like, because when in the pandemic there was the whole Save the Arts thing, and it was like when there was Insta stories and all sorts about oh, when the pandemic and the world shut down, the first people you turned to was artists. And I was like, well, no, we turned to scientists and we turned to doctors and we turned to the NHS. Like, that was who came first. So I wonder if, and I know, and I don't mean that these arts aren't valid, but in the sense of academia, funding cuts, all these things, it's like, I get why they're not at the top of the hierarchy. Does that make sense? In the sense of like, in society, what things do we need to prioritize when there are a limited amount of resources?
Oof.
I know the room I'm sitting in, so don't stab me.
No, not at all. Like, I mean, I'm thinking of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and what our hierarchy might look like in comparison with that. I think you're completely right in saying, when the pandemic hit, who did we need? And it wasn't probably me dancing around kind of trying to make someone better.
It was Netflix after we were all safe. Let's make sure we're all alive and safe, and then go and sit and watch Netflix.
I mean, it's a huge question, because it's like, what does a society need to
Everybody.
function? And there's obviously a lot around at the moment, especially in terms of education, arts impacting education, and how that's impacting both kind of in terms of primary all the way through. So that pathway is being hit. Universities, especially right now, in terms of being very targeted in terms of funding cuts. In general, the budget by Department of Culture, Media and Sport is getting slimmer and slimmer. That then obviously goes off to the Quango of Arts Council England, that then gets disseminated to many, many places, including museums now. So we're always under threat. There's always some cut, and there is an argument to say, well, dance can happen, whatever, it will always exist. It will always happen in some way. And actually those times in history when it's been knocked back or subdued, great innovation and creativity has always flourished as a result of those moments. I think it's looking at, and more people are doing this, in terms of dance tends to talk to dance. So dance tends to engage other dance researchers or people already interested in it, and doesn't always do a brilliant job of actually reaching wider audiences.
100%.
So again, we know and could list many ways as to why dance matters. And I know there's actually been funded policy around this. Literally, there was a policy called Why Dance Matters, and it was listing and loads of quotations from artists and across the board. The Guardian had a great someone did why art should be saved at university level, and at the very end of the book you said all the reasons why, and at the very end, and this is why I believe this, and I'm a scientist of etc. And which isn't like a nice curve. So I think what dance needs to do when it's getting hit from all angles is going, what can we actually do a little bit better here to talk to the wider audience?
I agree.
To talk in terms of the language that we're using. There was a conference that happened last week, and that it was saying in terms of, we need to be better at using statistics. We need to be better at actually putting things within an Excel spreadsheet that are going to make much more sense to those at government level that are actually going to listen to it. Who, in terms of policymakers, are we talking to the same people, or do we need to be broadening that? We know, as been demonstrated in terms of the Dance for Parkinson's kind of ongoing project.
Welcome collections work as well.
Or those health interventions in terms of having the dealing with the dealing with the cause and not the symptoms always, and actually the huge amount of work and therefore funding that could be achieved through that. And thinking as well, referencing kind of the Popping for Parkinson's work that's been going on, and loads of other practitioners that are doing those kind of health intervention work. So I think my answer, rambled answer to your question would be, no, it's actually not as important as those kind of scientists in that kind of pandemic health first, but we could do a lot better in terms of being able to talk to different audiences and strengthening the case and not always being on the back foot.
I 100% am behind what you just said, and I love that, because this is something that I've thought, maybe not such an articulate way, but is that, I often hear from people around. It's like very victim, like,
Yeah.
oh, we don't get this and we don't get this. But I'm like, you know, even if we can go from the wider dance culture or into specifically hip hop, but like say with hip hop, battle events or hip hop events are just other dancers that come to watch. Like singers don't put on a singing show for other singers. They market their music. They release an album to the general public. Like we put on shows for each other. And I think that happens not exclusively, but a bit too much. And I think my thing, you know, why I agree with you as well is like even going to galleries and exhibitions or dance shows or going to the ballet or going to see contemporary or something, it's very esoteric. Is that the right word? Like it's very, if you care about art, you like it. If you don't care about art, it doesn't even try to draw you in. Like I've been to some exhibitions and I'm like, I love art. I love galleries. I love being in gallery spaces. Even if you had nothing on the wall, like I just love being in that environment and I'm bored and I want to leave. Like you have made no effort. It's very like, oh, well, if you don't get it, you don't get it. It's not for you then. And I hate that approach because not other art forms don't have that. And I know there's a line between, you know, just diluting your entire culture and turning it into like a Fast and the Furious movie just so everyone comes. But there's also the other end where we're a bit too, at times I find art a bit too precious and a bit too like, well, if you don't like it, it's not for you. And I hate that approach because I feel like that as someone part of the let's say the arts. And I think if, like you said, we did a bit better in terms of looking at like, well, how can we get these things in? You know, people always complain about football players getting paid what they get paid, but they bring in huge audiences. That's why their salaries is what it is. You know, if doctors and nurses had a viewing audience of like 10,000, like they would be able to bring in this revenue. And I think it's the same with all the arts where sports have a massive audience base, so then you can sell advertising, you can do all these other things, and then you can pay people more. So if we were able to appeal, and I think that's actually what hip-hop has done a bit better than some of the other art forms, is like we are a bit more, and this is where I guess also it plays hopscotch with that line of like some hip-hop shows are a bit too family friendly and it's like, all right, you're just doing this to sell tickets. Some go a bit more the contemporary route where it's like, okay, this is like, if you don't know about hip hop, you won't understand this show. Some get it bang on. I think Far From the Norm are a great example of that. It's very good art, deep art kind of
balance
thing. Yeah, but it also, if you don't care about hip hop or dance,
walks the tightrope really well.
You watch that show and you're like, wow, this is cool. And there's a lot of other artists that do that. Boy Blue is a great example as well. But yeah, I think this is something that we don't focus on a lot, and maybe this is kind of ties into the idea of it not being academically looked at, you know, and we're just like, what do we want to do? But I think even in these things which are academically looked at, like ballet or things, it's this, and I wonder if it's linked to the class structure, where it's like, well, if you don't have the money to come, this isn't for you. And then the people who, just a little side tangent, I was reading a book about cults, right? And not to say that arts are a cult, but
well, if they are, surely we should join it.
Yeah. But what I read was that, you know, when you join a cult, they make, or even like university fraternities and stuff, they make you do all this horrible stuff to get in, right? And
initiations
and whatever. And it's the same with cults. They make you do all sorts of horrible stuff to be in the thing. And you would think that once you do those things, you would be like, screw this cult. Like, this is horrible. This is, you know, screw this fraternity. But actually it strengthens your will to defend that thing because you have to justify why you went through all that rubbish. Why did I have to dress up like this and run around the campus? Because this fraternity is the best thing ever. Because otherwise you're just an idiot who ran around the campus naked or whatever it is, right? So I wonder if it's the same sort of thing with the arts where we have to go through all this crap to like get it. So we have to pay a lot of money. We have to dress up nice. We have to go to this exclusive place and blah, blah, blah. So once we're in, we can't go, oh, that painting's horrible. We have to say the painting's amazing because otherwise we're the idiots that paid £50 to get in to see this horrible painting. Do you know what I mean? So because art's subjective, I wonder if it almost takes advantage of that thing in us that like makes us defend the thing the more we have to do for it. Yeah, it's like an exclusive country club.
It's
almost.
like, if you go to certain, like there's a code and convention to all these different dance styles. Like if you go to like something that's a little bit kind of, woof on the other side of contemporary where like it's navel gazing. All right. And then you'll see people in the audience, like at the end, nodding their heads. Yeah, but it's a specific type of nod. Or if you think about like when the students do collide, there's a specific type of whoop and calling out names. All right, so it's a club and we want to join it. There's something about that because we're we're animals. We want to be in a group as such, So,
and we want to be validated by what we like. Oh, you guys all like that thing. I want to be with you guys, so I like that thing too.
Yeah. And then I like that because you like that, and I said that you like it, and no. We made an agreement that that's good. It's the emperor's new clothes. If you know that fable, the whole village goes, no. He's totally dressed.
And the more people that say it, the less chance there is that someone's going to be the guy that goes, I think that sucks.
Now, to put the question back to you. So those goalposts of hip hop.
Yes.
So if now there's a whole club and there's more of you saying that hip hop is that.
Yes.
Then it's going to get a stickiness. And that's all that ballet did. And that's all that contemporary did.
Sure.
And that's all that like salsa or kind of other styles is that there were just more people agreeing on something.
How do we I wonder let's say put it like this. I wonder if there's a more or less valid person or voice in that. So like if hip hop came from these marginalized groups, right? Do we prioritize their voices over ours and be like, well, there's 5 of us like white people from South London, or there's like 3 New York people that were there in the 80s and they all say one thing's hip hop, but the 5 of us say it's not. But are our voices more or less valid, or are they equally valid? And if so, why does it matter then that they're the pioneers and they started the culture? If we just outnumber them, we can change their culture. You know what I mean? And then are we messing with the political kind of undertones of the style? And you know what I mean? Like it's a...
But you're asking all those valid questions, and that's what academia is all about.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to them either.
No, but it's about, and I know Laura's going to come in here. Like if you're thinking about kind of, whose voice matters the most.
Yeah.
Like that's your first thing that you should be doing as an academic. All right. If you're like a ethical academic.
Yeah.
So there's a b-boy who's recently completed his PhD in the US, and again we're going to have to like circle back and do a little like, and the name was because it's not near.
We can do a reference.
Yeah, we can do a reference. Recently came out in Dance Research Journal, which for those that don't know is kind of the epitome of academic journals for dance, essentially. Okay. And it was revealing the undiscovered voices of female breakers in New York. So obviously all the narrative has been that yes, there were, but not so, but really wasn't documented.
Yeah.
Well, actually that research was filling that gap, essentially. Was going back and was going, well, no, there were actually.
Uncovering voices and bodies.
And also analysing what does that mean that certain voices didn't come through in that time. So going back to whose voices are who should we listen to, I think it's also interesting that history is returned to, and the importance of history, herstories, that are returned to, and those gaps are filled. Just to not just assume that what's been said in certain books and publications is the norm, and we're getting that more and more. It's being more unearthed, so that history is being dismantled. What I was going to go back to was saying about dance and the value of dance and everyone talking to each other and it being club, etc. What we struggle to get across is how visceral dance is. So at the end of a class, whatever you've been doing, the damp feeling of sweat on your skin, the high of the endorphins that has taken thing, the collectivity that has been constructed in the class of a community of people. I'm a salsa dancer, and the feeling of, wow, did that just happen? Oh my God, we just that I wasn't expecting that when you did that, and then that moment's gone, and then you're elsewhere, and likewise the end of a training or drilling or whatever it might be. And that's what we struggle to necessarily get across on a page, on a written page, that high that we all know in that dance club, in that arts club, about what it feels like to truly experience that, to have that embodied feeling. Can that be replicated on a sheet of paper? and can we then get that fit without getting parliamentary focus groups to do a dance class to experience that. I remember working with the mayor's office on the Dare to Dance project way back, and we had Boris there, and we were trying to get him to do part of a hip hop, and he was not going to do it, but he was there and he was showing his face and he had his picture, etc. And I think it's just one of those, but if you'd actually had done it, if you had actually felt that, you might have got a glimpse of what we get to experience.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's why I feel it's counterproductive to gatekeep too much, because I know people in my family who like feel very uncomfortable about the idea of moving, and I'm obviously there like, hey, think I do all the time. So it's just that thing of Boris Johnson is a different example, but people that think it's uncomfortable think it's really uncomfortable. I don't think I've ever met someone that thinks dance is either like really good or there's either really good or really bad. There's like no one that's like in between, and I feel like that's why you've almost got to have like a hand on both wheels of like understanding the culture, knowing where you're from, knowing that you can easily voice it to everyone, but also like trying to voice it to everyone, if that makes sense, and feeling valid in voicing it to everyone.
Yeah.
So when you're starting your PhD?
No.
No.
just on the idea of that mind-body split, the Ken Robinson TED Talk, which is an absolute classic. He talks about the need for dance in education, and it if you haven't watched it, do, because he neatly sums up in that what we're trying to achieve through education, and that we're just giant walking heads, essentially. Our bodies are just carrying our heads around to different meetings. And it was actually saying that if we got back to the sense of the importance of the body, and if we privilege that more in education, what could our students, what could our future learners become if we went through that?
I think what I was going to ask you as well, on what you were saying, is like, and I mean, going back to the idea of this arts club and that type of thing, obviously you have a specialism in popular dance. So what is it about popular dance that manages to like break out of this, or what is it about dance that makes it popular dance, I guess, and lets it break out of the arts club? And like, so there's a difference between, let's say, like some artsy film that, you know, only film heads like, and the Fast and the Furious. For some reason, not for some reason, there's a lot of reasons, but the Fast and the Furious can appeal to everyone. You don't need to care, you don't need to pay attention, it's not too deep. What is it about dance that then makes it that thing where anybody can watch it, that, like you said, that usually we have to know what that feels like? So when we as dancers see someone on stage, we're like, I know why that's so special and why that's so difficult or why that's so amazing. But there's something that we can do with dance that maybe we're not doing in a widespread way, that can get anyone, that can get, like, you know, my uncle to be like, oh, that looks really cool, or, you know, whoever, or like family entertainment. And I think we can look at extreme examples of that, you know, like any of the, I mean, even the stuff that you see on like TV shows and stuff, or like Britain's Got Talent, where it's like high energy backflips, loud sounds and stuff. It's just like, okay, you don't have to think, just watch. But then, and then we know what the other end looks like. It's like a really super boring ballet piece that like everyone that doesn't know anything about dance just goes, what am I watching? They're just like rolling around on the floor or whatever. What's the middle ground? Like, where do we find something that's still, like I said, the far from the norms, or people like this, where it's artistically good dance, but it still appeals to a wide audience? Like, how do we distill that?
Oof, again, I'm going to use that. It says a lot there. First, referencing Mary Fogarty did a manifesto of a case for popular dance, essentially. This was a good number of years now. But try to define that, and honestly, it's the hardest thing to define, but because you're kind of looking at location. Where does the dance happen? The community, who is doing the dance, what is the intention, the purpose behind it, and often we end up working again on this this split, which we don't want to get ourselves into, because we're in that wrestling place of like, it's one thing or it's not. And that's where this idea of you might have heard the terms high art and low art come in.
Yeah.
And high art being the proscenium arch stage, years and years of formal training in a studio that's equipped with very particular audiences. And again, not agreeing with this, but low art being the idea that it's for oneself or around celebration or around some kind of communal practice. The relationship with the music, because we haven't actually mentioned that yet, and that's absolute key to if we're talking about popular dance, in that it's that coexistent. And reference Dr. Jo Reed for her fantastic work on that. So the relationship between music and dance, the intention behind it, and that it's internalized as well. It's not necessarily for public display always. If you think about social dance and dance floors, and it's about joy. It's about celebration. It's about sweating with others. It's around courtship, shall we say? It's around
very academically
or it's around, I don't know, religious ritual, or it's around,
it's
and
the first thing that we were doing when we were in caves. It's just that it couldn't be captured, and what we've got is some paintings. But if you look at the paintings,
so for me, when I was kind of going through, and we were majority in our degree looking at kind of more that contemporary dance, proscenium arch thing. And then, I discovered for myself for the first time that social dance element of it, or again, that, flirted with hip hop is what I will say. I just flirted with it. And then was kind of so people do this for enjoyment, because I'd come from a very kind of formal training environment. I was like, oh no, this is for the love, for the for so many other reasons other than I'm going to charge £16.50 for a ticket in row B 13 to watch a triple bill of a contemporary dance element, and then. So different people have different entry points into dance. And I would say for majority of our students, it is that discovering through digital media, discovering through, that they will have their own influences as to where they've reached that. And I think that's what's key about our student body, is that they haven't necessarily come through that formal training route, perhaps, that may be in other degrees or other vocational training schools that have and have come, and our responsibility then on the degree is to ensure that those dance floors, those that way of that recontextualization to a studio does not feel completely foreign from what was from the origins of a style. So I think Carla, our amazing program leader, made the really great point, was that when we actually went to online learning over the last year, say, actually it was returning to bedrooms. It was returning those forms to actually their place of origin, you could say. So again, a rambled comment, but that would be. So that answers kind of what I love about popular dance, the middle place. So again, it's around the intention of what you're putting out there. It's around the amount of production and funding that maybe sat behind it, that enabled a decent amount of R&D work, and then enough time to create that middle ground between okay, this isn't just arts for art's sake. This is actually does maybe have a more commercially orientated element to it, but it is still an absolute has artistic integrity, shall we say. That's a very hard place to reach.
Yeah, and
it takes time and funding.
I think this is the trap I think that I see a lot of artists in a lot of different art forms fall into, is that they create the kind of arts for art's sake type of thing, or I'm creating this for me, I want to do this for this or for the culture or whatever, but then complain when it doesn't sell. And it's like, you have to take lessons, like even looking at something I guess kind of stupid, but like Logan Paul or people like that, right? Who he is marketing, and you know, even like 6ix9ine and like these people who are like horrible, like I don't ever want to be them, but they are doing something very, very clever in capturing everybody's attention. So my thought has always been, no, I don't want to be 6ix9ine. I don't necessarily want to be Logan Paul. I don't want to make a Fast and the Furious movie. However, what if I can take lessons from them and take the art that I've developed in this area and mix it and sell this, you know what I mean? If we go audience focused, take these lessons and put them with good art, I should be able to sell good art, right? And I think this is the kind of process which I'm in the middle of now, and I don't necessarily have an answer, but it's like, rather than just, we know we could all just sell out and, you know, TikTok dances and go viral and all that, right? Or we could do the opposite, which is like, I'm just dancing for me, I don't care what anyone thinks. It's like, okay, well then nobody's gonna look or think about your dance. So then it's like, how do we combine them and find the middle ground where you can sell, but also still, like you said, retain your artistic integrity. And I think maybe people don't like looking at that. It feels maybe insincere to look at how do I sell my art, because we're very much like, no, you shouldn't have to sell. It's this like underlying like,
no, people need to be paid.
Yeah,
bills need to be paid.
but
like, and
we don't acknowledge that, and we don't say that, yes, you need to learn how to market and sell your thing, or at least not on a wide enough scale. Everyone's tends to have this almost underlying disgust for people trying to sell their art, and it's like, you should just be in your room painting or dancing, and someone should walk in and go, oh, I want to sell that for you, you know what I mean, or I want to pay lots of money to buy that painting. And it's like, what all of us working artists know is that a whole portion of your time has to go into marketing and selling and analyzing your art and seeing which bits can sell to an audience. Otherwise you can't continue to do your art. So yeah, I just think it's an interesting point with popular dance, which
actually is why the other thing that we do on the degree is around a whole chunk of stuff around arts management, production, marketing and comms, etc. And we do that because we like to think that our students will not only get jobs, but they will create their own jobs. And we're not saying that all have to be that, you know, an artist who's also a producer, who's also the filmmaker, who's also but it gives them some skills that means that actually you can go out and not fear that under 15 Arts Council application, or you can go out and actually have some decent project management skills that sit behind the work that you do, so you can pan out your R&D, you know, 4-week studio time or whatever it might be. So I think that's just as important. And I love seeing the work that our students do, because I know that even if they're not directly thinking that they're producers, they're producing their own work in some which way, and we're giving them the skill set to feel confident to do that. I think that, and seeing those relationships as well, that kind of artistic producer at that end of the scale that's working really closely with artists, and that their voice is just as valid as the artist up high, and that working collaboratively with that. And we're already seeing some great, if you think of other producers working within hip hop dance, as well as the big, as well as from Breaking Convention through to the oh goodness, I'm gonna have to have a name check of the big project that we've been working on in terms of partnerships with East London Dance and others. Yeah, we're all going this face right now. Well, it'll come to us. But I think those are really important. Again, how to take that brilliant artistic work that's happening within hip hop, within the hip hop dance genre, let's say, and how to take it to that next level. So it gets the recognition.
Can I shift it slightly?
Shift away.
For it. Yeah, and just say, taking it back to like researching, do you think that's why dancers are scared to be researchers? Because there's this like glamour, but like a rebellious glamour of like being a creative and being an artist, and I'm against the bounds and no one knows what it's like. So then the minute there's writing, everyone's like, oh yeah, but that's like fitting to the norm.
But you also told that You're also told that, so you kind of like stop behaving that way, because if you're someone who is primarily about moving, you've been told that that's what you should be all about, which again comes to that split.
And I think there's also something in the sense of being an artist. I think there's a very wrong idea, especially amongst a lot of young artists, that when you go to something other than performing or creating, you've like given up.
You failed.
You're like, oh, if I give up, I'll become a producer, or if I give up, I'll become an event organizer, or whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
Which is, and I speaking to people in kind
Hierarchy.
of my and my like age bracket, we're all kind of realizing like, hey, this is just as valid, and I'm enjoying. I don't need to, if I want to stop being a dancer and become this or do a podcast or whatever it might be, it's not any less valid and it's not any less needed. And actually, we would benefit more from having a wider range of different inputs, especially into hip hop culture, but dance in general as well. Like we don't have any for something that's at the moment the biggest culture in the world. And this is kind of, not that it's all about the podcast, but this is my motivation with the podcast. Is like for something that's like the biggest culture in the world in the sense of hip hop, and hip hop dance is also it's not as big as hip hop music, but it's up there. We don't have much media that is based around that, like even music podcasts. We have a lot of hip hop music podcasts, even like Joe Budden podcasts and all these different ones that I listen to. But then we don't have a lot with dance, even on a smaller scale. There's like only a few. There's more that's popped up in the pandemic because people are at home and want to do Zooms, but there's not a lot of like podcasts in general. There's more YouTube stuff now, whatever. But yeah, I think it's super important for people to whether it's academia, whether it's producing, whether it's any of the behind the scenes, whether it's even becoming like a lighting designer or anything that's not performing is equally as valid, and it's still creative and it's still needed.
Which is why, here comes another plug, why this course is really good, because all of those are valued and they have equal weighting across the program, all right?
Yeah.
And then added to that, what I like seeing is when the student who's really good at like the arts kind of management side is now kind of with one of the students who is kind of, making really, really good work, but just can't handle the other stuff that comes with it. And then kind of partner up. So you've got the person who's like going to get that work out there. And then you've got the person who's making the work with, for the stage or the screen or whatever. And those are important. And if we can start those relationships like here with the youth on the good balance, because, old people, I'm one of them. You can't change us. We like it. All right. But if we can like make this place like a hot house, like a laboratory for all these kind of connections, because that happened in other styles, and then to have like, you've got companies where the producer is integral to that work, where you might not see that choreographically on the stage, but it wouldn't be on the stage.
You know what I think also is like, we see this especially from, again, my fairly limited viewpoint, is just my opinion before anyone shouts at me. From the hip-hop scene, we see this lack of diversity in roles when we try to move into other spaces. So there was a whole period up until like, I don't know how many years ago, like I'm 31, it was like maybe 5 years ago that I didn't know what a producer was, full stop. I was like, what is that job? And then I learned and I'm like, oh, I need a producer. Like I'm creating my own work now. And like, now I'm like consulting with various different producers and trying to do a bit of like having my own producer and also doing bits myself. But now I know that I need it, but I didn't know what it even was 5 years ago, right? And even when people go into like, stuff like Breaking Convention, where we have as a community a chance for the people that are very inexperienced, all the way through to the Boy Blues and whoever, but also there's a lot of people that end up on the Sadler's stage who are very inexperienced, which is great, and that's something that Breaking Convention does well. But you see that when they go there, they don't know. It's like, oh, we have to do lighting. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I'll have them on. Like, you don't know how to work with a lighting designer. Your sound, when it's on those huge speakers, is tinny, or it's muffled, or it's peaking. So you don't know how to work with sound. You don't know how to work with lighting, because in our culture, it's like, well, I dance or maybe I DJ or make a couple of beats. Like, what else do we do within our
Yeah.
Imagine a dance student. Okay, so I look back at I've been around for a long time. So I've got a few students that I taught in the 90s who they loved dance. They absolutely loved it, but they were never going to be professional dancers, but they'll end up being the students who were always helping out the other students with lighting. Now, because they've got that embodied experience of being a dancer, you know, they light dancers so well because they understand the moving body. So, like, you know, the more students that we have going through who are like, oh my gosh, I actually quite like being organized and doing the arts management kind of stuff. You know, that's where the wealth is going to be. But it's about an attitude.
So a few things. First of all, my reference check from before. I have to check myself. The project, which please check out, is We Move.
Jenny's on that,
So in terms of having producers within hip hop and training for them, and go find more. On the idea we were talking about in terms of, you know, realizing that they're dancers and you know, that they're moving bodies and that's what they do. Actually, again, the thing that I love about our graduates is, I mean, we've got so many who've gone and taken their skills on into I'm thinking of Maxine in terms of Ibiza DJ. I'm thinking Sophie in terms of going into dance and photography. Thinking of those that have gone into more kind of filmography. Those that are doing what's the word? Using kind of dance and text and using dance and poetry.
Sophie Barker.
It's those collaborations, it's those side hustles, if you will, in a sense that we're something that we're threading through, or even kind of beauty and makeup and those other skills. You know, a dancer is known for kind of, they can do everything really, and they often have to do everything because they're highly under-resourced generally. So actually that's a great strength for any dance artist because they have so much to draw from. And I would recommend to any of our graduates, you know, you need to expand that network. It's been really hard to do that in the last year because of the pandemic, but that network of collaborators, they are the ones that are going to help you take your work, whatever that looks like, to the next levels that you want to achieve.
And I think this is super important. Like, if we kind of go towards the like networking idea, is like when you're networking, I think a lot of people think about it as like, oh, who can help me get to the next level, right? So if I'm a choreographer, I might be looking at, oh, who are the big deal choreographers? Oh, I need to talk to Kenrick. I need to get in with these people, right? Whereas now I'm starting to look at networking and collaboration as people who are maybe not even on my level of experience or professional. I mean, I've been doing it a bit longer, so I have, there's more people who are younger than me than there are. But it's like, okay, who is young and might be like wanting to build something, and who might be, exactly. Like, this is kind of the thing with someone like Taya, or the girl I'm working with who is my producer at the moment. She's not been doing it for a long time. She's very, very new to it, but I'm trying to build with her. So she's a dancer, but she also wants to produce. She's a lot younger, but it's like, cool, let's do this then, and let's learn together, and let's build you up to be a producer. So I'm going to use my work and my choreography to get you into positions to learn, and my network to help teach you. And then maybe she's going to find someone who's maybe a lighting designer who's not the most famous lighting designer, or just some, you know what I mean? There's someone who has an interest. I might find like a producer or a beat maker who is up and coming, and that's how we build a network. And then, you know, even the people that I have in my network, in the sense of like, I feel like I have quite an extensive network of dance artists and choreographers, right? Who, like, let's say if Taya was like, look, I need advice on choreography, can you point me in the right direction? I feel like I have a long list of very established choreographers that I could put Taya in contact with and be like, yo, my friend needs help, can you hook her up? Those people, when I met them, were not great. They were just people. They were just other people in the scene, and we built a bond. Now, 10 years later, they're at the top of their game. Like, you know, whoever they might, when I met Tally, you know, she's always been good. Same with Kenrick and stuff, but I met them a long time ago. And it's not like me coming to Kenrick now and be like, oh, hey, I want to get advice from you. It's like, we've known each other for a long, long time. So I think it's like, building these networks and being the person that's that. Like, there's a lot of people who are longtime collaborators of mine, let's say, in terms of my photography and videography, and I've shot for them since forever. But they, again, Tally's a good example. Tally was asking me to do stuff from when I was not very good. So now I've got better, and she's got better and got better. Now we have like an established partnership because she built the network of, I want to work with you, or, I'm building the network with Taya. And in 10 years time, when she's like this all-star producer, whatever you go into, then it's going to be like, oh, remember we worked together for ages. We have this whole network. And I think that's super important.
You don't have to be just one thing. Like, and I think people do think that all the time in, just again, I can't help but reference, like, Farooq Chowdhury says that a producer needs to have one eye on the money and one eye on the art and another eye on yourself and your own personal development and who you are and what you're bringing to the table and what you can continue to learn. And that you can bring so many influences for all your whole toolkit that you'll come out with, be it through a degree or through life experience. They can input into the work that you're creating.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Of course.
So when you're talking about like your journey, what came into my mind was mentorship. All right. And we have interns here around with UEL, like
Me again.
But that's really, really important because that's when you experience it. And so kind of circling back to research, it's really important that we have people that we mentor as academics who we can show them this is what we do, have a go, and like I think of some students, like I think of Corinne, who ended up doing an MA. She's going to do a PhD. She's come in and she's been lecturing here for us. So she's getting an idea of what it is to be an academic because nobody tells you. And like being a producer, or, you'll hear some things, but what your way of working is, you've got to figure it out, So I think across the scene, the more opportunities that people mentor, don't gatekeep. There's that thing of like a ladder and you climb up the ladder and then unfortunately most people pull the ladder up. What you should be doing is pushing that ladder down with as much force as possible, and making those steps wider because like we can't moan about the fact that we're not recognized in by the general public and all that if we're
not
infighting and not supporting each other.
Yeah, and I think also there's and this is something I wrestle with, but there's something about the competition aspect and the, if and I have to force myself not to be in these habits of thinking, but like if I'm a photographer and I specialize in working with dancers, right? And I've got work as a photographer and a videographer, particularly because people have been like, we need someone who understands how to shoot dancers. So I've been paid purely because of my experience in dance. Now, it's hard to not think of anyone else that pops up who has that same thing as competition and to go, actually, I want to support these people. So, like even with Sophie, Toby from Oddventure, Joe, Monkey Flip, Max, Cheshire, like there's loads of it in the commercial scene as well.
Make a company.
Yeah, like this is what I mean.
Make a company.
The I guess ingrained thing into us is to be like, oh, I've got to be better than them. I've got to do this. If you work with them, actually you can multiply how much work you all get.
Records.
Right.
Boom.
And there's a lot of examples, but I think this is what the trap you fall into if you're not self-aware about that is like, and it's the envy and it's the personal feelings. Like I have to put my personal feelings aside in a lot of those cases because a lot of these people who work in the dance scene are very, very good. And of course I have my own internal like, oh, am I going to be good enough and all this? So you want to kind of push them away to quiet down those feelings. But actually what you have to do is bring them in and learn from each other and work together. And the more I've done that as I've got older, and anyone that I feel like is competition, there's people that I don't particularly get on with, and that's my personal choice. But in terms of professionalism, anyone that does what I do, I'm like, let's meet, let's talk, let's have a coffee, let's be friends. Like, oh, you're a choreographer, you're a videographer, you know this, this. Let's all meet, and then we're all smarter. We all pass each other on jobs. We all get more work, rather than trying to stop the work going to each other.
Because then you're not going to move forward.
Yeah.
You know,
I think there's a quote like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, or something like that. Which I think is like, it's making more and more sense as I get older. I'm like, yeah, it is really true. You can do a lot more with a team than you can just trying to go.
And I would say for like the course, that's really evident through being now through 3 years. I feel like the first year feels like there's a massive hierarchy, lots of cliques. Everyone thinks like, who's good at dancing, that's the good people, and who's not good at dancing, that's the not good people. And being a personal in-betweeny person, it was interesting to like watch it all kind of evolve, because I feel like with uni people join it thinking it feels very school-like, like having
you also come in at an age where you'll probably still have some leftover insecurities that force
and
those things.
I think that's so because everyone's insecure, everyone has to throw themselves at the top and be like, well, you're shit, so so that's fine, that means I'm better than you, so that means I'm going to do well in the course,
and you get your validation from being better than someone
but like
else.
as the 3 years have progressed, I've noticed like that everyone's kind of shifting and being like, oh no, you're really good at this, you might not be good at when we did Bharatanatyam, but like you're good at producing, you're good at this. And by third year now, I feel like everyone's like, oh, I respect everyone's different journeys. And I feel like it's almost like a microcosm of what we should be doing in dance generally, because like that's the point, like we should all just validate that we all do different things, and that's okay.
I think, and it does happen in places as people get old. Like I feel like what you're saying about third year, this is kind of how I feel about maybe the wider hip-hop scene in my experience, where now I'm 31, all the other 31-year-olds I feel are starting to do that, and we're all like, oh yeah, I respect you, even though you're, you know, I beat you in a battle, but you're such a sick producer, or you're like, you know, or whatever, and we're starting to all do that. But again, it takes a while to get there, because you have to move all your insecurities out the way, all your worries, all your this.
And like, just because this is something I've just learned as a person myself, like just because you think someone else is better than you at something, it doesn't mean that you're not good at other things. Like it honestly doesn't matter, really.
And what is good in an objective art form, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're good because, like, I had this loads where it's like, oh, this person, I think I wrote a status about this ages ago, but like, this person beat me in a battle, but then the next day they paid a ticket to come and watch me in the theatre, and then the next day they hired me to film them in a video, but then the next day I beat them in a battle. Okay, who's better? Like, we're all fans of each other, you know. Like, you can talk about experience, which is just like how long you've been doing it, you know. You can talk about what you've done, how much you've been paid, or whatever, but in terms of just being good at the style, the more you embrace the different like non-linear progressions, the more you can just appreciate everything, you know. It might be like, oh, this person is not as good as me because they haven't been recognized on this stage, or they haven't won this battle, they haven't been paid for this, but the skill set might be way higher. I've just marketed my stuff better, so there's no real way to say who's better, you know what I mean? I wonder if you want to go into the questions.
I can do, yeah.
Yeah, so we have some student questions.
Yes.
Ooh.
From student.
Why did I get this mark? No, like, why did
Okay.
We know who
Why didn't you?
What should we start with?
Start at the top if you want. We'll go through as many. It's up to you. You choose. Which is your favourite?
Trying to think if any of them kind of fall off what we've just been saying.
No, go random.
Should I just go random?
Yeah, go random.
Okay. So a first year, Sophia Tomek. Yeah. She's asked, how can both theory and practical be accessible to dancers outside of higher education?
Outside of higher education.
I guess saying about like why us gatekeeping again, keeping it for ourselves.
Or I guess it's like, if you don't have, you know, sorry, my thought would be, it's not only the gatekeeping, but also like, if you have a university, you have a building, you have teachers and this structure to come in and sit down and do the work and get someone to tell you, do this, submit this. If I'm just a person in the scene and I'm going through the kind of self-taught community route, how can I also access theory? Because I've had this, like, all the classes that are set up, all the one-offs, you know, like Bass, Studio 68, whatever, it's practical classes. All the workshops that happen are practical. So where do we get this theory? I would love if there was an open theory workshop where you could just pay £5 and go and sit down and learn, and someone could like teach you about the history. I'd pay for that.
Access. It's about accessible language as such. So that's why I think the more, I'm a big fan of I'm on the editorial board for Hotfoot, all right? But my dream is, I'm going to get really good at Adobe. That's my next job. But my dream is to have a dance magazine, which the students are running, because we have Collide every year, and there's the most amazing pieces. And if there were students writing about those pieces, those students also aren't, they're just not going to want dance students to be reading it. They're going to want their family, their friends, and all that. And then that means an accessible style of language. The problem with academia, and this is what I fight against, and this is why I'm here at UEL and not at some place that makes me wear a gown and I have a sherry allowance, although I would like some kind of liquor allowance, is sherry that allowance. They do, right? Is that it sherry. Talks and writes in a particular convoluted way, all right? And I'm against that. I think you should have written something and I should be on the tube, it falls out of my bag, someone else picks it up, reads it and goes, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's really interesting. So for me, like, there's a lot of books coming out now. Like, I think of Akala, all right? I think what his book should be on the reading list for first years. You know, there's some certain ways that academia needs to be in itself accessible. Does that answer what Sophia was saying?
I would say so. Yeah.
So to echo that, academia also gatekeeps financially. So there are paywalls to certain journals.
Yes.
I would encourage anyone who wants to, again, flirt with theory and practice in terms of dance studies, to search out those that don't have a paywall, because there are lots that don't. More and more academics are now trying to, especially those that are established, that don't need to climb the ladder, as it were, they are going, actually, no, we're only going to focus on those journals that are open access. And that's really important, because we're just talking to each other if we're only publishing in things where you have to pay an annual subscription for it. So I think that's important. Something like academia.edu, actually, if you're if you're a bit sneaky like me and you just put up the stuff that you've published, a couple of photocopies here and then, sorry publishers, but like it means that then it's actually accessible. And I know I've sent you some stuff through that in terms of like, have a look at this page. It's like the Facebook for academics. And it just means that there are ways to access it. If you are I'm open and I want to find it more, I'm just going to reel off a list of names because I think then just some names to search out, because I wrote these down earlier. So Takia Amin, Thomas DeFrans, Cheryl Dodds, Katrina Hazard Donald, Naomi Braggin, Jeff Chang, Joseph Schloss, Jay Lorenzo Perelio, who's just got a great book out on hip hop dance in the Philippines, Imani K. Johnson, great work in terms of kind of hip hop and black cultural heritage, as well as stuff around the cipher. Halifu Usamare. We say it wrong all the time. So Mary Fogarty, obviously Dr. Joe Reed, Dr. Saraleigh Castelyn, Dr. Laura, so why not? And I'm going to throw Ian Abbott in there as well in terms of the stories that he's been collecting lately. There are loads of others, but I just think if you're going to go, here's some names to look up, see what they've written, find out a bit, then that's a good way to start.
And I think if I can add on to that as well, I would say that, the question of how can both theory and practical be accessible is like creating our own. So I think we see a lot of this through, maybe it's...
Which is why I want a dance magazine.
Exactly. No, I think that's exactly the right thing. And I think a lot of people are very intelligent and very knowledgeable on certain things. You might be like a 23-year-old who's had like 10 years of battle experience and you've been traveling. It's like people write statuses about stuff, write little Insta stories. It's like if you make a blog and to be honest, this is what the podcast is for me, is like if you write a blog and write these things out, it's like that is theory. You know what I mean? If I can go and read like someone like Sonny, who is like a world-class battler, not everyone has the time or will to do these things, fair enough. But if Sonny had like a blog and he wrote all his thoughts, experiences, like Renegade has like his statuses, but it's like, I even said to him, it's like, you need like a blog or something, because it's like, I'm not going to scroll back through your Facebook to find this. And in 10 years time, 50 years time, this is all going to get lost if the internet, So we need I think it's like people taking these thoughts and all these things and just writing them down, creating material, creating whether it's tutorials on YouTube, whether it's like video essays about certain things, whether it's breaking down their favorite pieces or whatever, the more we create as a community, the more there's going to be out there to consume, I think, rather than just waiting for someone to package it all up nicely into a university course. You know what I mean?
Or now imagine if there's a student who really likes writing. Can you imagine then that student graduating and then going and working with an artist, so they don't have to do the blog, the student or the graduate's going to do the blog.
Yeah. And I think maybe it goes back to funding as well. It's like, how does that person get paid then? And if you're a struggling artist and you're just about paying yourself, your first thought is like, let me not pay someone to. It's like we have to find ways to make this sustainable.
But universities can, and I know UEL it does do this, because it is a degree. There are certain things that have to happen in order to enter that degree, and that's. And I completely understand how that then seems possibly exclusive in terms of for those that get to do that. But one thing it does do is the partnerships it works with, and the funding that can operate if say we get an artist and ourselves working together and we go for, let's say, Arts Humanities Research Council funding, etc., and we can create something together to make a bridge, and really a good university should be having that impact in its communities and further afield. I think more can be done.
I agree.
I think more can be done.
I agree.
And I think in terms of opening the doors of the ivory tower kind of thing, definitely more. But often it's around time. It's not around there's the will, definitely, but it's often around time and resource. Especially, as to why those things don't happen.
Pay your bills.
You know, when you're talking about open access, I think it's also academics need to be ethical in terms of which publishers that they go for. So a lot of academics go for particular named publishers because they have value, because they have prestige, not thinking that those books then are, when they get first published, they like 63 quid as such, and a lot of libraries can't even buy the ebooks because they're so expensive. Where there's other publishing houses who do still have peer review processes, but they don't have that kind of boom, snazzy kind of big name. And I think that's also the responsibility of the type of academics that we have, And I'm doing a plug here, but so I work a lot with a university in South Africa, University of KwaZulu-Natal, and the Centre for Creative Arts. And over the last few years, they've really done something in terms of having dance writing residencies. And some of our students, UEL, have been involved, kind of cross-cultural. And they've been reviewing work that's happened at a particular festival, and then having their work looked at by professional dance writers who are editors for either newspapers or magazines. So again, it's that kind of mentoringship. And so the more that happens, the more the understanding of the kind of relationship with theory and practice, because they're not separate. Sophia will know that by the end of her degree.
I'm just thinking as well, just to answer that question, is also for anyone to check out Pop Moves. Pop Moves started in the UK, it's now international, and essentially it's around advancing scholarship in popular dance, because actually it's a tiny niche within a huge field anyway of dance studies is this element here. So do have a look at the work that Pop Moves are doing as well, because that will has some great resources on the website, etc.
So in almost a continuation, because graduate Sophie Barker basically continued that sort of conversation, saying, in what ways could we enhance the relationship between practical and theoretical dance? She also put, P.S. Love you, Saraleigh and Laura.
Can we do a big up about practice-based research?
Well, yeah, it might be worth almost describing what that is. I think you're probably the better place.
I'm going to try now. Okay. So Sophia's question was about theory and practice, but here I'm going to do one of Joe's. I'm going to put my hands together and my fingers together to make like a cradle. So they're not separate. Theory and practice are together. They interweave. All right. So the way to think about it is this. If I am studying Ken's work and his choreography, all right, the first way I could go about it is actually doing his class and then writing about his class and then going back to perhaps the video of his class and watching what happens and then writing about that and then going back to the practice. So they're not separate. They inform each other. And the way I think about it is, you know, the infinity sign, the sideways figure of 8, that's what we do here. So my outcome might not be a choreography as such, but by playing with choreography, I then have an understanding of perhaps how Ken works. Yeah? So they're not separate. And I think someone like, back to Sophie's question, she'd probably be able to talk quite articulate about this, because her work is around poetry and dance, and they're not separate. They inform each other. And that's the way we need to think about the work that we make, in terms of, you know, someone who's writing about, let's say, a particular kind of dance culture, let's say, this is why I love Carla's work, is to be able to analyze what happens on the stage. You have to also experience the club, yeah? And it also helps to experience the class and to understand what the jack is, so that when you're analyzing the jack and writing about it, you have that feeling of the jack, yeah? It's not very easy to explain. Like the fact that we have to use Joe's brilliant putting the hands together, and we have to use the body to explain that relationship. And that's what the body does so amazing. And I don't think we give dance enough credit for that it captures things that words can't. And that's the fun and the messiness of then having to put that into words so that someone else somewhere else can read it.
I would also add to that and say, you know, we present, let's call them academic texts, on a certain quite complex subject to students. Actually, one way that they might try and have a greater understanding of that is to take that idea into the studio and explore it physically.
Upside down.
And to actually then have because, you know, we've got all different learning styles, and actually that might be the way that complex idea on gender or on racial identity or on post-colonialism or whatever it might be, that might be the way that understanding happens. Going back to then education in schools, wouldn't it be great then if all science lessons in terms of physics, etc., were through the medium of dance?
But they do it in maths when we're younger. They do it in, like, if we have to count 1 body, 2 body, 3 body, okay, make a group of 3, because we visually see it. We kinesthetically experience what 3 is. It's just later on, it gets devalued by society. But there are other places in the world where dance is integrated with maths and science. It's a particular type of government kind of thinking, you know, about what education should be, which is... Can I say, like, about the theory and practice as well? And earlier, I get very excited, okay? Is like, when you were talking, like, if we think diversity taking the knee, okay? So how do we show our protest? We show it through our bodies, okay? But yet, then we can start thinking, okay, so where does that come from? So imagine you see that for the first time, and you're watching it, and there's a reaction from the audience, like, and you don't know about it, okay? Or you understand that it is significant. Like, think about, you're going to have to do the research to be able to say why it's significant in that moment. So then again, the actual practice of taking the knee needs the theoretical understanding then about the marginalization of African Americans and so on. So they're not separate as such.
And I would advise Sophie and everyone to look at some of the stuff that's been written around Black Lives Matter and the protests that were happening, and the use of whacking and the use of breaking, the use of these styles within it. Exactly talking about that in terms of coming from a Black cultural studies perspective as to why that's so important to embody that protest within that moment through those particular styles, and what that then means.
Should we go for one more, maybe?
Yes.
Maybe this one?
Yeah. So
Those other ones are similar.
So Sasha, who is a recent graduate of third year, asked specifically
Sasha.
Sasha, specifically to you. But I feel like we can open it out afterwards and say other influences. So how does practicing South African dance forms influence your writing within dance? And then I guess we could bring it on to your influences as well. All of it.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah. Like I was saying in the beginning, because its origins is political, its aesthetics are political. So even now, if you watch it, there's something quite urgent in it. Okay. So for me, it made apparent the relationship between politics and the body, whether it's the body dancing or whether it's the body walking through Stratford. All right. So that had a profound influence. So when I look at a style like hip hop, and if I'm writing about that or teaching about that, that's kind of how I see it. And it's coming from my own embodied experience. Likewise, also for writing, I don't just want to, when I write stuff for like journals or, books and stuff like that, I really like incorporating other types of writing. So there's this thing called performative writing. So basically what it is that I try, when I've watched something, I take notes, all right? And then what I do is I try and put those notes into a particular mode of writing that captures my experience of seeing what was happening there, And I think also writing is choreography, because writing, like the word choreography, choreo and graphy. Graphy means to write. Choreo is the Greek word, basically referred to Greek theatre and the organization, the structure of the bodies in the Greek theatre when they were doing the plays. So if someone was going to like write on a stone tablet and say what was happening on the stage, they would use choreography. So that's the writing of the bodies. Boom. Writing is like choreography, because you got to think of where the emphasis is, where the bold is, where where that gap is and stuff like that. So that's why and Sasha will know this very well, I think if there's anybody who's going to be able to write about dance, it's dancers.
Yeah.
Oof, again. So I used to, it's taken me a while to get to this place, actually, and thinking about my culture and my cultural background, because I grew up in East Midlands, fields, not a lot of nightlife, very much, and I think this is true. If you think of London or major cities as like a cultural hub, and then that kind of gets drifted out and out and out, and you might eventually hit some suburbs, and then it might hit, and then there might be a street dance class or something that appears
in a studio
ran by someone called Jan. I don't know, it's kind of, and so I've often gone, well, what is my kind of cultural background in terms of that? And actually, I think that has actually informed, because I am interested in the mainstream. I'm interested in televised dance. I'm interested in actually kind of the construction of whiteness using Black cultural forms, essentially, which if you look at some of the work that as it goes out and you look at populations and who's engaging with these practices, I weirdly go back as well to a terrible nightclub in Wellingborough. Sorry, it doesn't exist anymore, so I can say it, but like Evolution, where we used to go and sneak out when we were far too young, and actually thinking about though the dance floor and
was it sticky?
And it was very sticky. and it's a different podcast. And then. And actually thinking about constructing a young identity through those nightclub experiences and through early interventions with house or seeing if you're first ever if you think of watching Flashdance and seeing Crazy Legs do the very short segment within where she's kind of watching and like, what is this? And and actually so it's been really interesting that I've come from my own kind of cultural background and how I've reached that place in dance, but yeah, nothing as dramatic or is essentially, but it's still actually it's situating with a very very particular cultural moment in terms of 80s, 90s UK, and how that intersects with class, how that intersects with identity construction. And it's really, if I look at my work now, it's really informed my writing.
I was going to say, which is why we need to have more students and graduates writing, because they all come from different backgrounds and experiences, you know?
Yeah. I think it's like, it's super important what you said, I think, because it's like, I've had a lot of conversations with younger dancers who question their place in the culture and their validity to be in the culture. And
how I feel.
Yeah, right. Okay, so and maybe that's interesting to speak. I mean, we're running low on time, I think, but maybe you can get a quick few lines in about that. But I think it's important because it's like, I think what it sounds like that you've done is be very self-aware in like, this is where I've come from, and you didn't go to New York and like seek out the culture found you somehow. So it's like you're being very self-aware and like, how did this culture reach me and what is it that drew me in? And that's my identity and that's my place in hip-hop, is how you got into it. Like I always talk about, like, I didn't get into dance, and this is less a cultural thing, but I didn't get into dance because I loved the art form. I wanted to impress girls. So like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like we have different inputs, and so through the courtship thing that you were saying earlier, that was my entry point to the dance, and a lot of my early experiences in dance were seen through that lens. And the more I'm self-aware and honest with myself about that, I'm not like, oh well, I came in this dance to spread the culture, and like I didn't at the beginning. I then fell in love with it and found the importance of it later. But if you understand and are just real about the fact that everybody comes from different perspectives, you're not going to worry, because we're not expecting everyone. We know it's a worldwide culture, so nobody's expecting you to be a pioneer from the 70s and be like, well, you know, I was in a gang in Bronx and this happened. And it's like, we know you're not, because you're from the West Midlands, or you're from Japan, or you're from, you know, but somehow this culture found you. And I think just being honest and authentic in your entry point to the culture is kind of how you can be secure in it, I think. I don't know if you want to like talk about your feelings from your perspective.
What, on how secure I feel being part of?
Well, because what was it that made you say, oh, that's me?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe being young and being quite a self-aware person, it makes me overthink my, like, I almost get quite a lot of imposter syndrome in a lot of things, because I feel very like, am I supposed to be here? Am I good at this? Da, da, da. And I actually have talked about it with Joe, signaling you again, that when we're talking about like my career, I realized by the end of uni I've really worried that I was like, oh my god, everyone's in the hip-hop scene is in the hip-hop scene and everyone's good at that and that and that, and I was there like, oh, I got into dance when I was little and I used to watch Cats and like that was my thing, and I like commercial classes a lot, and I had to like reteach myself that just because I'm sat now in the culture of like hip hop, that doesn't make my like love for anything else less valid. And that I don't know, that like it's a good, I guess now I'm changing what I just did about that, because like actually it's good to have been brought through an education of hip hop and urban styles, but still be like, but I still think I'm going this way, and I think that's fine, and that's what I was going to do since I was little. And I don't know, like maybe merging them together is a good thing. And that's why I feel like from the very beginning of this podcast episode, I was very like, well, I think we shouldn't like box them, because as a person that's never boxed myself, and I don't also know if I could describe my style or anything like that, I've come to the realization of like, oh, that's fine though. Like when I started uni, I was like, I don't have a style, I don't know what I do, I only did street classes, like it's not valid, it doesn't count. But by the end I'm like, oh no, because that's creativity though, isn't it? Surely.
And you know what I find interesting, I think I've said this to Joe before, because I've done some of the feedback for the third year final projects, and actually something I've found is, and I'm sure I said this, if not they can hear it now, but what I've said, I think that sometimes some of the students are too invested in what style am I going to do. It's like, I'm going to do this piece and I'm going to do hip hop and pop it, and it's like, first of all, why is that the thing that you want to express this message through? And second of all, something I've realized as I've got older is like, no matter what style you do, you have to be an artist without those styles. So I do hip hop in battles, right? I do pop in battles. I've done classes in other styles. I've studied like very briefly like ballet and tap and all that. But take away the style, what is my artistry? What does that look like? If I just said, Taya, just dance, don't do a style, just move. Are you able to? Because some people will be like, okay, cool, just freestyle, do anything you want, and they're like,
I think I'm
okay, and it's like, no, don't do locking. Oh, okay, don't do. It's like they don't have their own style. And I think for me, I think that as an artist, you have to be able to remove the medium or the outlet for your artistry from who you are as an artist. You're even if you stopped dancing and became a painter, if you stopped painting and became a singer, like you're still an artist without any of those mediums. So I guess it's like, in my way of thinking, the way you've got it is better in a way.
I was about
because
to
you've
say,
got your thing, and then you can then choose to channel that into hip hop, into popping, into singing, into painting, into photography. You know what I mean? If you find who you are.
I was literally about to say, maybe I'm actually lucky on reflection that I have never been able to like put myself in a box because I've never had the opportunity. So then when speaking of my own final project, like that's why I was like, haha, I'm not very good at choreography, so I love lighting, so that will be my concept. Because...
And I think your final project was great.
Oh,
or like,
thank you. Watch on my Instagram. And that I think only in this last 6 months of uni is it clicked, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm okay with everything I make, everything I do, even the clothes I wear. I'm like, oh, okay, we love grunge.
Yeah,
and like I don't know if I feel like I've got that because I've lived with dancers as well. That I feel like all of us have suddenly been like, oh my god, this is exactly who I am. And I don't know if all of you felt it as well at a certain age, but maybe just because of also COVID, we've had to sit with ourselves a lot, and that I've suddenly been like, oh my god, that's exactly what I like, and why am I not doing what I like, and why does it matter if someone else is telling me like you're not very good at locking or popping? And it's like, oh, I don't care. You can be good at it, but that's fine. I validate you, you validate me.
Taya, I'm 38 and I just got a tattoo. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you never stop finding who you are and how you want to express yourself.
I'm just sitting here and I was mouthing to Nora, because that is so wise. Okay, that really is so wise. And so you're blessed to have that wisdom now. Right? But like Laura said, maybe in 3 years you'll lose it again. And then you have to find it again. Well, but the core thing is what you were saying about being an artist, that it doesn't matter what the medium is, all right? It's who you are. It's the way you see the world. Whether it's going to be this or that, that's not the issue. It's about acknowledging you're an artist.
Like, if you speak French, Japanese or English, you're still Taya.
Yeah.
So it's the same. That's how I view art anyway. It's like, you can be like Jenny, my partner, is like, she thinks she's funnier in French because French is her native language. She's absolutely fluent in English, but she only learned English when she was 12. So she's like she says to me, like, I wish your French was better so you could hear how funny I am. But she's still Jenny regardless of the language. You might have more proficiency or more ability to express yourself. There's things that I can express through photography that I would never do in dance because I'm like, that's not the medium for that. Or the opposite, like I would never like take pictures of a certain thing. I'm like, no, that's for dance, like that's for that. And the for me, that's why I like having different mediums, because I feel like I can express different things. But you don't get that until you find yourself in a way. And like you said, that's like something that you
which is what university's
gain and lose.
For, though. University's for that. You get this like 3 years.
So is your 20s. That's what it's for.
You get these 3 years to hang out, do a sherbet load of work, but to figure out who you are. You know, and yes, it is a luxury. But if you come, and I think you did, when you came here, you had that like, I'm here to learn. I'm here to be open, you know, and that's the best thing you can be when you start university. Is to go, look, I like this and I don't like that, but I'll give it a try.
I think that's a life way to think, you know, like, I think, to be honest, also, if you define yourself based on the context, you're only useful in that context. Like, if I'm a hip hop battler and that's all I do, it's like, you throw me on a stage and I'm like, I can't do this. Or you say, oh, can you choreograph this music video? I can't do this. I don't know how to. If I don't base myself on the context and I base myself on who I am, all then I need to do is figure out the medium, right? So I have a friend, I always talk about him, but like one of my best friends is a painter. I think I've said this before on the podcast, but he's a great, like when I gave him my camera, I said, can you take some pictures of me? He's got a great eye for photography because he understands form, he understands perspective, he understands light, he understands colors. It's all the same. He understands his perspective on the human form. So all he has to do is go, well, what buttons don't do what? And I go, well, it's this, and then that goes there. 5 minutes later, he's like, well, what about this? And takes a great picture.
Which is why dancers need to write about dance.
Yeah.
And just to add, is that I think then as you move through your career and through learning about yourself, etc., and this applies to writing, dancing, music, whatever, is also then always asking yourself the question, well, so what? Because if you go, well, so what? Who was this for? Well, so what? What am I trying to achieve here? Well, so what? I'm caught up in my artistic vision. Actually, what am I trying to achieve here? What's the point of this? Getting other perspectives, getting other influences, etc. That then will continue that creative journey, because you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's very true. Yeah, and if you get used to being comfortable from the get-go, you haven't got anywhere to go, really.
Yeah, and that is also the point of university.
I was going to say that.
Wonderful. I think we should wrap up because I could keep talking for another 4 hours, but I don't know if everyone could keep listening for another 4 hours.
I need some coffee.
Yeah, and we all need coffee. Well, first of all, thank you, Taya, for everything. Thank you for being part of the internship. Thank you for all the help you've given me in the podcast.
Yeah, this is like a little finish.
Roundup of the internship. People on the outside may not see the stuff that we've started, but hopefully in future we'll be able to look back and go, that's what we started in the internship. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with you, pleasure to talk with you today and over the last few months. Thank you to you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Great guest selection.
I know.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Cool. Do you want me to say anything, or is that it?
Yeah. No, just thank you massively for being here. Thank you for all your perspectives. It's been wonderful. Everybody who's listening, please like, subscribe, comment, all that sort of stuff. It does help. If you're listening on Spotify or anything like that, you can see the visuals on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube and you've got to leave and get in the car, you can put it on the Spotify and listen in the car. We will be back. We just finished our last collaboration was with Tally's Identity Ideas Industry program. That is finished. We did this as the end of Taya's internship. We have a few more things in the pipeline. But as I've said a few times before, I'm working on kind of making the podcast more sustainable. So as much as I would love to be banging out weekly episodes, I'm focusing on the long term at the moment. There's some things coming, I believe, depending on if I get some emails today. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Please, if you have any thoughts, let me know. If you want to get in contact with Taya or any of the guests, their social medias will be on the screen at some point.
Or go to the UEL Instagram.
And
there's more about both of them on
and
there.
I'll put the UEL Instagram here. But yeah, thanks for being here. Thank you to Joe. Thank you to
Joe.
University of East London. And thank you to Jono. And
all the people that submitted questions that
the
we didn't
people
get
that
to get
submitted
through.
questions,
Because there were a
yes.
few that we missed.
True. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Cool.
See you later.